The Untold Story of Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney. This is the story of two child stars who became the biggest box office draws in Hollywood, only to have their lives destroyed by the same studio system that made them famous. Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney appeared in 10 films together between 1937 and 1948, and their partnership generated hundreds of millions of dollars for MGM. But behind the success was a friendship forged in shared trauma, forced drug use, and a studio machine that consumed them both. Before they were Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney, they were Francis Gumm and Joseph Yule Jr., and both of them were performing before they could walk. Mickey hit the stage at 18 months old wearing a specially tailored tuxedo, pushed into show business by his vaudeville performer parents who made their living in burlesque and chorus lines. His father left when he was 4 years old in 1924, which meant his mother became the sole driver of his career, and that meant constant work from the earliest age imaginable. Frances Gumm started even younger at age 2, performing with her older sisters in an act called the Gumm Sisters. Her parents ran a movie theater in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, and like Mickey's family, they saw their daughter as a meal ticket. Both children grew up without childhoods, spending their formative years on stages instead of playgrounds, learning to perform for adults instead of playing with other kids. Mickey made his film debut at age 6 in 1926, and between 1927 and 1936, he appeared in 78 short films as a character named Mickey McGuire. The studio legally changed his name to Mickey Rooney when he was a teenager, taking away even his birth identity and replacing it with a brand. Frances Gumm got the same treatment when she signed with MGM in September 1935 at age 13, and studio executive Louis B. Mayer personally renamed her Judy Garland because he thought Gumm sounded too much like Gumm. What nobody talks about is how early the exploitation started. Mickey's mother dressed him like a dancing monkey and hauled him from theater to theater, collecting every dollar he earned. Judy's mother Ethel did something worse, and according to biographer Gerald Clark's book Get Happy: The Life of Judy Garland, she was the first person to give her daughter pills for energy and sleep before Judy turned 10 years old. When Judy grew up, she called her mother the real Wicked Witch of the West, and that tells you everything about who Ethel Gumm actually was. They met in 1935 at Lawler Professional School in Los Angeles, a 2-room schoolhouse where child actors took classes between filming. Mickey was already a rising star at 15 years old, confident and popular and dating older actresses. Judy was 13, insecure about her appearance, and terrified that MGM would drop her contract at any moment because the studio made it clear they thought she was too plain and too heavy. MGM moved both of them to an on-lot schoolhouse taught by a woman named Mary McDonald, and that's where their real friendship began. They studied together, rehearsed together, and started to understand that they were living the same strange life that nobody else could comprehend. Mickey was the golden boy who Louis B. Mayer called his son, and Judy was the girl Mayer called my little hunchback and fat little pig with pigtails, which shows you exactly how the studio saw its young talent. Mayer told Mickey something that reveals the entire studio mentality, and the words were, "You're Andy Hardy, you're the United States, you're the Stars and Stripes, so behave yourself because you're a symbol." That's what MGM did to children, turning them into products instead of people, and making them carry the weight of representing American values while pumping them full of drugs to keep them working. Judy had a crush on Mickey when they first met, which makes sense because he was charming and talented and treated her kindly. The problem was that Mickey never felt the same way, and he spent his teenage years chasing other girls, including an affair with actress Norma Shearer when he was 18 and she was 36. That dynamic would define their relationship for the rest of their lives, with Judy loving Mickey in a way he could never return, and Mickey loving Judy, but not in the way she initially wanted. Their first film together was Thoroughbreds Don't Cry in 1937, and MGM immediately saw the chemistry between them. The studio put them in 9 more films over the next 11 years. And 3 of those were Andy Hardy pictures where Judy played the girl next door who pined for Mickey's character while he chased prettier girls. Art was imitating life in the cruelest possible way. The big breakthrough came in 1939 with Babes in Arms, and that year changed everything for both of them. Mickey earned an Oscar nomination for Best Actor at age 19, making him the second youngest Best Actor nominee in history, and the first teenager ever nominated in that category. The film became MGM's highest-grossing picture of 1939, with an adjusted worldwide gross of $401 million, and that's when Mickey became the #1 box office star in America. He stayed at #1 for 3 consecutive years from 1939 to 1941, beating out Tyrone Power, Spencer Tracy, and Clark Gable. The studio worked him like a machine, and between the ages of 15 and 25 he appeared in 43 films. At his peak he earned $100,000 per film, which made him one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood, and MGM made sure every dollar was worth it by scheduling him for multiple productions simultaneously. Judy's star rose alongside his, and the same year as Babes in Arms she starred in The Wizard of Oz. That film made her famous worldwide, but the studio's treatment of her during production set the pattern for everything that followed. She was 17 years old, 4 feet 11.5 inches tall, and MGM put her on a diet of chicken soup, black coffee, and cigarettes because they thought she was too fat. By the time filming wrapped, she was already addicted to barbiturates and amphetamines. They kept making films together, and the formula worked every time. Strike Up the Band in 1940, Babes on Broadway in 1941, and Girl Crazy in 1943, all made enormous amounts of money. The secret was their chemistry, which read as authentic because it was authentic, and audiences could see that these two young people genuinely cared about each other, even if the nature of that care wasn't romantic. Their final film together was Words and Music in 1948, and by then, both of their lives were falling apart. Judy had been married twice, fired from multiple productions for showing up late or not showing up at all, and her addiction had progressed to the point where she could barely function. Mickey had served in World War II from 1944 to 1946, earning a Bronze Star for entertaining troops in special services, but when he returned his career had lost momentum and newer stars were taking his place. Here's what actually happened behind the scenes, and this is where the story gets genuinely dark. Judy described the studio's protocol in her own words, and she said they'd give us pills to keep us on our feet long after we were exhausted. Then they'd take us to the studio hospital and knock us out with sleeping pills, with Mickey sprawled out on one bed and me on another, and then after 4 hours they'd wake us up and give us the pep pills again so we could work 72 hours in a row. She finished by saying half of the time we were hanging from the ceiling, but it was a way of life for us. The pills were Benzedrine, which is an amphetamine designed to suppress appetite and provide artificial energy, and Seconal, a barbiturate used to counteract the stimulants and force sleep. MGM studio doctors handed them out like candy, and when young actors complained about being exhausted or hungry or unable to sleep, the solution was always more pills. The studio scheduled them for inhuman hours, sometimes working them through the night and into the next day, and the only way to make that possible was pharmaceutical intervention. Judy's mother started giving her pills before the studio did, which meant she was hooked before she even understood what was happening to her. The studio just continued and amplified what Ethel Gumm had begun, creating a dependency that Judy would never escape. By age 17, she was taking pills to wake up, pills to focus, pills to lose weight, and pills to sleep, and that cycle continued every single day for the rest of her life. Mickey denied all of this in later years, and he told journalists Judy Garland was never given any drugs by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Mr. Mayer didn't sanction anything for Judy, and no one on that lot was responsible for Judy Garland's death. He claimed that Judy chose that path herself, which is either a lie or the worst case of denial imaginable. Mickey was in the studio hospital bed next to hers, getting the same pills, and his claim that the studio bore no responsibility is either protecting the system that made him or rewriting history to avoid uncomfortable truths. The physical toll showed up fast. Judy's weight fluctuated wildly as the studio forced her to gain weight for some roles and lose it for others, always using pills to control her body instead of allowing natural changes. She developed insomnia that lasted the rest of her life, and her emotional stability crumbled under the chemical roller coaster. MGM convinced her to have an abortion at age 19 to maintain her girl-next-door image, and that trauma combined with the created a person who was fundamentally broken by her early 20s. Their relationship was strange and deep and impossible to categorize. Mickey described it in a 1992 documentary called MGM When the Lion Roars, and his words were, "Judy and I were so close we could have come from the same womb, and we weren't like brothers or sisters, but there was no love affair there. There was more than a love affair, and it was a forever love." They called each other Mick and Jutes, and everyone who knew them understood that their bond transcended normal friendship. Judy had wanted romance when they were teenagers, but what they built instead was deeper and more lasting than any romantic relationship either of them ever managed to maintain. When Judy attempted suicide in 1967, Mickey and Dr. Buckley went to her house on a hunch and found her face down on her bed, and that visit saved her life that night, even though it only delayed the inevitable by 2 years. The tragedy is that neither of them escaped what MGM had done to them. Judy cycled through 5 marriages, desperately looking for someone to love her the way Mickey couldn't. Her final marriage was to nightclub manager Mickey Deans, a man 12 years younger than her who she married on March 15, 1969. At that wedding, she said, finally, I am loved," and 3 months later, she was dead. MGM fired Judy in 1950 for excessive tardiness, being overweight, drunkenness, and instability, which is a remarkable act of cruelty considering the studio created all those problems in the first place. She was 28 years old, addicted to multiple substances, and suddenly without the only career she'd ever known, which meant almost 2 decades of struggling to survive by performing in nightclubs and concert halls, to pay the hundreds of thousands of dollars she owed the IRS in back taxes. Her performances were erratic, sometimes brilliant, and sometimes disasters, where she could barely stand on stage. By early 1969, she was 46 years old but looked 20 years older, and the drugs had destroyed her body while the emotional trauma had destroyed her spirit. On June 22, 1969, 12 days after her 47th birthday, Mickey Deans found her dead in the bathroom of their rented London apartment. The official cause was accidental overdose of Seconal sleeping pills, and she'd been taking those pills since before her 10th birthday. 20,000 people lined up at Frankie Campbell Funeral Chapel in Manhattan to pay their respects. James Mason, her coster from A Star is Born, delivered the eulogy and said Judy's great gift was that she could wring tears out of hearts of rock, and she gave so richly and so generously that there was no currency in which to repay her. The woman who generated hundreds of millions of dollars for MGM died owing money to almost everyone. Mickey outlived Judy by 45 years, and those years were both a blessing and a curse. His career spanned 88 years from 1926 to 2014, and he appeared in over 300 films. He married 8 times, had somewhere between 9 and 11 children, and filed for bankruptcy in 1962 despite earning millions throughout his career because of gambling addiction and the cost of all those marriages. The really dark part of Mickey's ending involves elder abuse, and in 2011 he filed a lawsuit against his stepson Christopher Aber and Christopher's wife Christina, claiming they'd subjected him to verbal, emotional, and financial abuse while converting millions of dollars to their own use. On March 2, 2011, Mickey testified before the United States Senate Special Committee on Aging, and his words were, "I felt trapped, scared, used, and frustrated, and if elder abuse happened to me, it can happen to anyone." Mickey Rooney died on April 6, 2014, at age 93, from natural causes with complications from diabetes. His estate was worth $18,000 despite lifetime earnings in the millions, and his will left everything to the stepson who cared for him at the end, while disinheriting all 8 of his biological children. The man who'd been the #1 box office star in the world for 3 consecutive years ended his life with almost nothing. Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney were 2 kids who started performing before they could walk, met in a schoolhouse on the MGM lot, made 10 films together that generated hundreds of millions of dollars, and both had their lives destroyed by the studio system that created them. The drugs that MGM studio doctors gave them to keep working 72-hour shifts killed Judy at 47 and left Mickey defending his denial of studio responsibility until his final years. Their friendship was real, forged in shared trauma and mutual understanding that nobody else could provide. Mickey called it a forever love, and he wasn't exaggerating. They knew what the other had endured because they'd endured it together, strapped to beds in the studio hospital, while doctors injected them with amphetamines and barbiturates to keep the production schedule moving forward. The studios don't do that anymore, at least not in the same overt way. But the lesson remains. Child stars are manufactured products, and the system that creates them doesn't care what happens after the money stops flowing. Judy and Mickey were the biggest stars of their generation, and both of them ended their lives damaged, broke, and fighting battles they could never win. When Judy died the day before the Stonewall Inn riots in June 1969, legend holds that drag queens rebelled partly out of grief for the woman who'd become an icon to the LGBTQ community. When Mickey died in 2014, he'd spent his final years testifying about elder abuse in front of the Senate, while his family fought over the scraps of his estate. Neither of them got the ending they deserved, and that's the real, untold story of Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney.